nice introduction. We are absolutely thrilled to be not only personally, as Hugh and I have been so proud of our Irish heritage from the, well, in my case, a few years younger than him, but we're thrilled. And what has struck me the most is the synergies and the coincidences that have happened to get this in place. And of course, knowing that our grandfather came from Ireland was pleasing enough. But the next step was the fact that the owner of this aircraft, who is a friend of Uli, my colleague, phoned to say he'd like to buy a DC-3. And I had no clue. And the first person I turned to was Flippie. Now, Flippie is the CEO of Springbok Aviation Services in more ways than one vintage aircraft in South Africa. The first thing Flippie said, I've got the perfect DC-3 for you. So I'd like to hand over to Flippie, talking more about this DC-3 and why this is such a special airplane. But to come back to the future of where we're going, we are so impressed and so thrilled with the cooperation and motivation that we received in Ireland, which unfortunately didn't happen when we took the airplane into Germany. Willie and I spent a lot of time in the last 2 years trying to get this aircraft registered and operating. But without the will of people, it didn't work. And of course, back to the coincidences with Hugh and the IHFF, here we are. And as Hugh correctly said, the owner has open-minded enough, in fact, as is Aer Lingus, IHFF, Ryanair in Dublin, to encourage this. And in so saying, this airplane will stay in these colours, as Hugh said, for the next 5 years. And it'll get a lot of exposure because Uli has been inundated with display functions and airshow participation. But in particular, in 2019 is the DAX over Normandy, 75-year celebration of the landing on Normandy. So she'll take part in that. And I think, if I'm correct, 2 weeks later, it'll be the 70-year anniversary of the Berlin airlift. She'll be taking part of that. So a lot of hopeful good publication for you. Again, my personal thanks to the IHFF for this initiative for us to get going. But more so, I've really been overawed by the positive attitude, of course, not only just Shay, but who we dealt with so much in setting this up, but to everybody. Aer Lingus, as I say, ASL group have been absolutely marvellous in making our lives simple to be here today. Flippie rebuilt this airplane, and if I may hand over to Flippie for a few minutes to tell you exactly where this comes from. So thanks very much, everybody.
In 1969, the South African Air Force gave me the opportunity to do a conversion to learn to fly a DC-3. And I was 19 years old at the time. And it ended up in being an extramarital affair for 38 years. It's become part of my life. I cannot imagine being without the DC-3. And it's gotten me into a lot of trouble with my wife over there. The moment I sell the one, I buy the next one. And so it just carries on and on. But then if I say to you that the DC-3 is actually part of my DNA, you'd ask me now, how on earth do you then sell a nice aeroplane like that? Well, Noel and myself have known one another for many years. It's 38 years that we've known one another. And he gave me a call when I was on duty in the Far East. I was in Beijing, in fact, when I got the call. And he talked to me about the DC-3 for his friend Peter Adrian. And it's not quite like he said. He really pushed me hard for my aeroplane. And it was in a moment of complete and utter mental lapse that I decided to sell this aeroplane to Peter Adrian. Well, before I start taking people, I would just like to tell you a little bit about the DC-3. Of course, it's an iconic aeroplane. I've got 26,000 hours. I've flown just about all the Boeings, all the Airbuses, nearly 100 types of aeroplanes. I still fly Repeat and other old aeroplanes. But honestly, the DC-3, in my opinion, is one of the most rewarding aeroplanes I've ever flown in my life, in my career. And when they designed it specifically with the purpose of making commercial flying or flying passengers commercially viable, and they succeeded. And what we as people experience today in commercial aviation, people tend to forget. It actually started off with the DC-3, and here we are. We are still able to fly the aeroplane and experience it. What a wonderful privilege it is now. This specific aeroplane was built in August. In fact, I say she was born on the 17th of August 1943. And it was built for the United States Army Air Force and lent lease to the Royal Air Force, immediately seconded to the 5th Wing, which the South African Air Force was part of, and it ended up itself in 28th Squadron. It was extensively used in the demobilization process of South African troops from North Africa, and it did what they called then the shuttle service between Cairo and Swartkops Air Force Base in Pretoria. And it did that. The demobilization process took more than a year, and that's ordered it up and down to Cairo. Then from the early 50s, it was moved to 35 Squadron, and this is why it is in such good condition, because in 35 Squadron it was used as a navigator trainer. It had 3 stations in the back for navigator training. And it wasn't utilized that much, and it lived mostly in a hangar, in a hail-free area. That's why you don't see any dents on the aeroplane. And also the utilization was low, so it ended up, when I sold it to Peter Adriaan, it had 13,700 hours, which is nothing for an aeroplane like that. After it was actually sold out of the South African Air Force in 1996. It had 2 owners before me, and then I bought it at Rand Airport when it was about to be scrapped. And that is part of our business model, is me recovering airplanes like that, rebuilding them, developing them mechanically, and commercially then selling them. So that brings me to the point of starting to thank people for what they have done. Peter Adriaan, I think, needs to be commended. You know, in the European world now, where everybody shies off these aeroplanes because of the impossibility with the regulators, that is still persistent. But I think it's also a credit to you too, that you believed that as a team, the 3 of you could possibly do it, and you've done it now. We know there's a resolve, so we're really pleased about it. But I'd really like to publicly say that Mr. Peter Adriaan really deserves a lot of credit. And then coming to Ireland, you know, guys, let me tell you something. If you look at now what is happening in Europe, how they are fighting to stop these aeroplanes, and what Ireland is doing, being prepared to actually accept the aeroplane onto the register. And of course there are higher risk flying these aeroplanes than modern jets. But if you know what the risk are and you manage it, there is really no problem. We've been, as a company, operating DC-3s, 4s and 6s for the last 20 years, and we haven't been exposed to a single serious incident with the aeroplanes, which just proves if you know what the risks are, you can manage it. And I want to thank the Irish people for the enthusiasm that they are displaying, and the dedication and the absolute commitment. There's another example of the DS-84. So thank you very much. I would like to thank the Irish Historical Flight Foundation as well, and of course Aer Lingus. And I want to sign off by just saying that I have this very big selfish need, which I have to fulfill, and that is to fly out aeroplanes, but I cannot afford to fly them myself. So I need people like this to make it possible that I can fly them. Thank you very much.